Hello, welcome to episode 68 of Talking Small Press Comics.
68? Holy cow.
Keeter.
That's my age, man. I'm 68.
Yeah, our show is as old as you are. But anyway, that's
fake,
Steve Keeter. I'm Larned Justin, and our special guest today is Tom Hart, Executive Director of the Sequential Artists Workshop. So welcome to Talking Small Press Comics, Tom.
Thanks. It's so nice to be here.
I think what we're going to do is let Tom talk a little bit about Sequential Artists Workshop, and then we'll have questions to throw in there. Some clarifications probably and things like that.
Yeah, I did make up a list of questions, but I'm holding back because Larned says, let Tom talk. Don't go off like you usually do. And just give him a chance.
Yeah, just a little chance. Yeah,
a chance. So,
well,
what is SAW? What's it all about?
What is SAW? Well, SAW is I think it's the school I always wish I had been able to attend back in the 80s when I was growing up and I wanted to be a cartoonist. I think I had my sights on like, who can teach me this stuff? Where can I go?
Yeah.
And I did wind up going to the one place that supposedly should have been able to teach it to me, which was the School of Visual Arts in New York City, where Harvey Kurtzman, for instance, taught and Will Eisner taught. And I think Art Spiegelman, I think at once had taught there, but wasn't at the time. But I went for 1 year and disliked the experience so much that I quit right after that 1 year. And
excuse me for 1 second.
Oh my gosh, we have dogs and all sorts of things.
We're not set up like we should be.
Is that his dog or your dog?
That would be his dog.
I see.
I have no dog.
Just wait for him to
You mentioned Gainesville. I've been to Gainesville. My daughter Kathy, since we're waiting for Larned, my daughter graduated from UF in Gainesville.
Oh, nice.
And she was second in her class. So she's darn smart, and she makes 4 times as much money as I ever did. And you know what? Both of my daughters, they love comics. But this is the interview's about you, but we're waiting for Larned. So
I know.
So both of my daughters love comics. They had to, because they grew up with a guy who had a room full of comics, who was doing comics every day, small press comics and stuff, and drawing and writing and publishing comics. Yeah, but you know what? They were into manga. We lived in a community, in a sort of an Asian community in downtown Orlando. And where's Larned? Okay, I'm filling in. Don't worry, Larned. We've got it under control here. And both of my daughters did comics. But they did them very much in a manga style. Not like me. I was, influenced by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and those guys.
Sure.
Because I'm kind of older. But Gainesville is cool. One thing about you, because when you live in a college town, everything is like it's like you're still in college. Even when you get out of college or you get out of school, it's a college community. So everything is really cool. And Larned would agree, right, Larned?
Yeah, sorry about that. My grandson came over. He had a problem. He needed something, and I was trying, and I can't find it. So he's looking for it.
But the dog is out of the dog is out of the way.
The dog is out of the way now. She's done barking, and hopefully
Zoe. Zoe is the dog.
Zoe is the dog. Yes.
She's a noodle. A
golden doodle.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Combination. Okay.
So what was Tom saying that I missed?
He didn't say anything. I did all the talking, but I'm going to be quiet now.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So should I go back? What you want to?
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, all right. So let's see. So I quit the School of Visual Arts in New York City. This would be about 1987, 1988. But immediately started thinking about, well, how would I do this? If I, what kind of courses was I looking for, and what kind of mentorship and what kind of teachers was I looking for? And I just started sort of like putting in my mind and actually writing things down and starting a file. But more importantly, what I did then, though, is I moved to Seattle, where all the alternative cartoonists were.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's where Fantagraphics was located, and a lot of older cartoonists, alternative cartoonists like Jim Woodring and Roberta Gregory and people like that were there. And as such, a lot of young cartoonists like myself, I would have been about 20 when I moved there. They were all sort of flocking there just to sort of be part of the scene. And I just sort of learned comics that way with about 7 or 8 peers that we're all in our early 20s, but like hovering around, hanging around all these older cartoonists and crashing their parties, which we did a lot. And I don't think we were really invited, but we'd show up at the parties and put up with us.
Yeah.
And then I wound up teaching at the School of Visual Arts in 2001. So that would have been about 13 years later. And ever since, it's just been a bit of a mission for me to make it accessible, to make it affordable, and to help people learn the medium. Because as a kid, I thought like, oh, there was stuff to learn. Whereas most people back then, you just learned it the hard way, which was either by doing it, or if you were lucky, by getting an apprenticeship of some kind. And I don't know, something about me just wanted a formal schooling structure. And so that's what I created once I burned out of being in New York City and being at the School of Visual Arts for 10 years, moved to Gainesville, Florida, and set up this just like Apple and Microsoft in a little garage. I started a school.
How many years ago was that now?
Well, I think we opened the doors in January 2012.
2012?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it was very, very low key
15 years.
For a good number of years.
It
was hard to get the word out. And I also wasn't a very good marketer, and I didn't really understand like that you had to be constantly telling people about it. I just thought they'd find it, but they didn't really. It's kind of difficult.
The site just offers so much. It's amazing how much you do offer.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah. In around 2017, we started expanding online, and we realized like we've got a lot to offer, and it's very hard to get people to come down to Central Florida for a long period of time, or to engage in the local community. So we thought like, let's expand outward and do that online. So very lo-fi, as you noted, my microphone settings are often wrong and things like that. But we expanded, in 2017, slowly building up. And now we have like hundreds, 1,000, couple thousand, I'm not sure, members who are sort of around, hanging around. We always have a couple hundred engaged in a direct way at any one time, taking classes and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. That's 1,000.
Well, I think so.
We have 1,000 members, really.
Well, it's hard to get real accurate numbers sometimes. We have 10,000 people on our email list, but that doesn't mean they're all opening the email. So but I think at any one time there's sort of, well, I don't know. It's hard to know. But
and the instructors now, like, how did you decide on instructors or who was going to do it and all that kind of thing? It'd be difficult, I would think.
Yeah. Well, when we started, I still have a few instructors from Gainesville where, I'm no longer in Gainesville. During the pandemic, I moved back up to the Northeast where my family is and my wife's family. But we still have some instructors from Gainesville, like Justine Anderson, who did work for DC, and Sydney Davidson, who's a great illustrator. So some of them came with us from Gainesville. Others, well, we do these free Friday night workshops, and that's sort of a way to for us to get to know new instructors. Maybe they're younger, maybe they've got their first book out or something. I don't know. We're always trying to expand both our base of students, but also teachers and mentors and things like that.
I saw this guy on your Friday night workshop a couple of weeks ago.
I saw it
right here.
Yeah, he was there. It was Finn McCabe's workshop. I remember.
Didn't make it last Friday, but I will make it this Friday. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, that one is Andy Kozlowski, who's also another Florida person. He's from Tallahassee.
Okay.
I'm sure he's in Tallahassee. Yeah.
So you offer that's free.
Friday nights are free.
Anybody can do that, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have things that you do. There is a cost to.
Right. We have some like 4-week courses, and and some intensive courses. We have a 6-month graphic novel program where people come in and they've maybe got an idea that they've had and they've sketched a little bit, but they haven't really made a lot of progress on. So that 6-month program is for that. And then we have a year-long program. That's where we started this school. Was I wanted to create an alternative to college or an alternative to art school, where you come in and for a year we teach you the basics of writing and drawing and story and all sorts of things related to that. And it's September to May, just like a college year would be. And that's the big thing we did in 2019 was we moved that from just being in Gainesville to being online. We took the best of the best of that course and what translated best online, and we made that into an online course.
I see. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we get about 50 people a year in each of those programs, it seems like, sometimes more.
Wow. So you have the on-site, you're in Gainesville, and then you have the online, and you're reaching out all over the world and bringing in people from lots of other countries and stuff. I mean, that's amazing. It's amazing how much it's expanded. And you started out with why? What did you have, like $20 in your pocket?
Yeah, not much.
Yeah.
A little bit of fundraising. Yeah, those were the days where, like, if I had to send out a mailing or something, I'd be like, can I just reuse these envelopes? I'd be trying to reuse envelopes and
been there, done that.
Yeah. A little better now where I'm just like, buy the envelopes.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've expanded a lot internationally, the online, the Friday nights, especially. We get a lot of people from Australia and a lot of people from Iran, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Iran, holy cow.
England too. I know there's a couple people that are British.
Yep. Yeah. A few from there. And anywhere else, I'm not really sure, but all across the country, all across America as well. And those are free, and we really like making that about the broader international community.
Yeah, that's fun. It really is.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just when did your interest in comics begin? I mean, was it when you were little and you did comics? You probably did do your own comics before you ever got involved in all of this stuff and the teaching and everything else. What can you tell us about your beginnings, your history, and what led up to this?
Sure. Yeah. It was almost all Peanuts up until.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Charles Schultz. I mean, it was comic strips for the longest time. We all grew up in an age where things were limited, let's say. and so my dad would come home with the daily paper, and those were my options. I could read Garfield, I could read Peanuts, I could read The Wizard of Id, these comics. And so I just every day just ate those up. The one that spoke to me most was Peanuts, of course. And so even in second grade, I remember drawing those characters, copying them, and making a little booklet of basically a Peanuts booklet. And it's been the only thing I'm even halfway good at for basically my whole life has been that. Nothing else am I even okay at except comics.
I don't believe that.
No, it's true. But I think maybe two other, Mad Magazine also snuck in there.
That was my thing.
Yeah.
Mad Magazine.
As a teenager. So Peanuts and Mad Magazine pretty much kept me going until I discovered alternative comics, which wouldn't have happened until a comic store moved into my town, and there wasn't one prior to that. And what's funny is this would be 85 or something like that. And so the store moves into our town, and I had been to one flea market maybe a few months earlier, and I'd seen like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but more importantly, I'd seen like Fish Police, but also Cerebus. So I'd seen a bunch of these oddball black and white comics.
Yeah.
And so this comic store moved into my town, and I went straight for those comics. I was like, do you have like this Cerebus and this Fish Police and things? And I walked right past all the Marvel and DC comics, including the reboot of Wonder Woman and things like that. And I thought like, oh, how cute that they still have all these, homages to the old comics or whatever. And I didn't realize like that was the bread and butter of the comic store, was keeping those things going and pull boxes and stuff. Yeah, I didn't know that at all. I thought the 3 copies of like Cheech Wizard or whatever that I was finding that's what everybody was interested in. But I wound up working at that store, and so I wound up getting a really good knowledge of mainstream comics history.
You know what's amazing? And a little store opens up, and they were willing to carry those kind of comics.
Yeah, he was.
The comic shops around that I was ever around. They never had anything like that. It was just mainstream comics.
Comics.
Well, it was the black and white boom, and maybe there was a little pressure to carry some of that stuff. But also, Bruce, the guy who ran that store, he had an open mind. He definitely was curious a little bit about that stuff.
Yeah.
It was right around the time Watchmen was coming out. So that was, things were expanding a little bit. So I worked there a couple of years and then went to School of Visual Arts, hoping to be taught by Harvey Kurtzman and Will Eisner, but mostly, and they were there, but.
They were there.
Oh, yeah. Well, Harvey was quite ill. He had Parkinson's and wasn't, and his assistant, Sarah Downs, was teaching mostly. And, but the problem more was the clientele, the student body, to be honest. I made 2 good friends there, maybe even 2 or 3, but most of the student body there were like cast-offs who just wanted to be drawing like the Hulk, like making out with Wonder Woman. That's like they would. Yeah. And I'm saying making out. That's the PG version of what they were really drawing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. and I was there to like tell literary stories. And so that's another reason I got it, but it's also very expensive, and it just seemed like I could find my path another way. That's when I moved to Seattle.
Yeah.
But I
always thought it would be hard, for somebody to teach you to draw. You really can't teach you to draw. Either you can draw, because or you learn it yourself or something, but I don't see how they can teach you to draw.
Well, that's just it. There are schools out there. When I was growing, I remember in the old comic books, they had there was an advertisement. We're looking for people who like to draw.
Oh, the little man, and then you draw the picture and send it in.
Yeah,
I did that. Yeah.
And they had this course. I guess it was by email. No, it wasn't by email. There was no email back in those days. But it was, you signed up somehow, and the guy was teaching you how to draw. Do you think you really can teach people to draw, or do you think that's innate, and what you're actually teaching people is how to tell a story, in a sequential way?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
I think you can teach all those things. I think the one thing you can't teach is how to be funny. I think that's an ingrained thing. Like, some people are funny and some people aren't. But I think you can teach how to draw. I think the first place you go is you teach people how to see, and if they can look at the world with different eyes than they normally do, because normally we see, oh, that's a hand, or whatever's in this side of that's a coffee cup, and they think they know what a coffee cup looks like, and they think they know what a hand looks like. But if you can teach them to look at that hand and that coffee cup and everything else a little differently, so that they actually are starting to look, that's the first step in getting them to draw.
Oh, I agree with that. That's a good point. Yeah.
And learning to tell a story is also, there are mechanics to it, and there are mechanics to all sorts of different types, and mechanics to drawing too. So I think there are things you certainly can teach.
I think a good thing too, now that I think about it, and I used to do it, is copying. Mad Magazine, I copied those guys. I copied a number of people. I just kept copying until I didn't need to copy anymore.
Right. So you were teaching yourself how to draw that way.
I think that's, and that's a good point.
And you know what else? Tracing. Tracing is great.
Yeah, I did some of that, but mostly copy. Yeah,
I did that a long time ago.
Some writers, I've heard stories about writers who will write out a short story that they really admire, word by word. They'll just type it out. They'll look at it and they'll type it out. And that's kind of like tracing, and it gets you used to understanding the kind of decisions that somebody makes while they're in the process of writing. And that's the same way with drawing. When I used to teach inking a lot. We don't ink as much anymore, sadly, but I used to teach inking a lot, and tracing an ink line is wonderful. And tracing a bunch of ink lines or some hatching, it really shows you like, oh, the artist was thinking about this. Here's why that artist made that decision. And I can make similar decisions, or I can make different ones, but I'm still going to make them knowing what I'm doing,
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Before we get too far down the line, I wanted to ask you about the 90s project.
Mm-hmm.
We were a little bit involved in that. And why don't you tell everybody about the 90s project.
Well,
That's the, I don't think, maybe that's not the exact title. But.
Yeah. Well, I was at a festival, and there was a panel about 90s comics, and short story, just to make long story short, I just thought none of the questions were very good on that panel. And I thought they don't have the right, they don't understand. I just think they were missing some context, like, what it was like to make comics before the internet,
Right.
why we made comics, what kind of efforts we went into to connect with people, to find an audience, to find a publisher, to find peers. And so I thought, like, I think we just need to record some stories. I don't want to like go, I don't want to try and like assess everything and be an editor or anything like that, but I just want to collect anybody who was there. I want to hear what they have to say about it, because we're losing that time. And I never thought I'd be old enough to say, oh my gosh, we're losing, we're losing our generation. But I know, but we're losing what we're definitely losing because of technology is a memory of what it was like before all these digital tools. So I started really quickly and just put up a website, connected with the University of Florida. That was an important part, because I wanted there to be a permanent archive, and started just looking for people that would tell their story. We haven't even done that many. We've done maybe 10 or 12, maybe even just 10. And you guys were one set, and it's still sitting on my hard drive. I had a very busy May, but June, this week or next week, I'm going to get it out there, and we'll have that out there. With
our video will get you about 25,000 more members.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, millions of views worldwide.
But what the woman at the so there's an oral history project at the University of Florida. It's called the Samuel Proctor Oral History Project, and they collect oral histories of all kinds for various reasons. It could be about people who've been there for multi-generations. It could be about people who fought in a war. It could be people who immigrated in, any number of reasons. It could be musicians and artists. It could be construction workers. And so I approached them. I said, what about cartooning? And they said, sure, we'll do that. So, but she was really great about saying, collect these stories, get as many as you can. And remember that your audience is people who aren't even born yet. Your audience is people who are going to maybe, 50 years from now, go looking into these archives and understand what it was like. And that really sort of lit up my brain a lot. And I realized, like, okay, it's a valid thing to want to do, but also I was thinking too small about it. And if I think that way, like, if I think the stories are being lost now, they're certainly going to be lost people 50 years from now. So I just want to collect stories about, to me, it's about how we create connections. Almost all of art making is like, you just want to connect with either an audience or other people like you who are making stories, or you want to connect with the work that excited you. And it was a lot different doing it analog, wasn't it? It was a lot different. I don't know, like,
I remember it well.
Yeah, you go down to the photocopy store.
That's what I had to do. Yeah.
And spend a lot of hours there.
Yeah.
Fighting with the glue stick and the, or whatever, the stapler and the, folder.
I still do that to an extent. I still go to Kinko's. It's a newsletter I publish every 2 months for a group called the UFO.
Yeah.
The United Fanzine Organization. Yeah. And I still go down to Kinko's to print those books.
And it's really,
you mentioned like the 90s project. Okay. I didn't get my first computer. I was a late bloomer, I didn't get my first computer until like the year 2000. So during the 90s and before the 90s, I was doing stuff the old-fashioned way. In some ways, I still do that, cutting and pasting up and all this kind of stuff. But I even remember before people were doing photocopy, for a while there was offset, and it still exists, but it's very expensive. But we used to draw comics on Ditto Masters back in the 1970s. So this goes way back. And and I was a pretty good inker on Ditto, But you got, these sheets, and you pull up the sheet. Well, you draw on the front, you pull it up, you put it on the Ditto spirit duplicator, which I used to have one with a crank, and I would crank it up, crank out those copies. And you were right about before the internet and everything. The earliest contacts that I made, I mean, I met one person in high school. He was a mentor. He was a college, a mentor, but he was a teacher. And Chuck Robinson II. And he told me about small press comics and about, they weren't even called that. It was still called fanzines back in those days. But he introduced me to that and gave me the names of a few people, and I would write letters to them. Would you like to do something for my new comic? 2 weeks later, you get a response.
Yeah.
Not 2 minutes later. I'm talking 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
And then you send him back a letter. Okay, sure. Here's a script. Could you draw this? Sure. 2 months later, you get the finished story. And it took a long time to make those books back in those days. But that's history. That's the history. And we are so blessed and fortunate to have what we have today. Technology has totally amazing. We were very happy back in those days. I used to get lots and lots of letters. I used to write lots and lots of letters. I didn't have a computer. I had a manual typewriter. It wasn't even electric, and I used to type stuff. But yeah, that's where it all kind of started, you know. So,
and to me, it's about to me the core is about community. And you were creating community that way, right? And you're still creating community with UFO, right? And it kind of sort of part of my point is that it can be done at a slow pace and still successfully, right? And so sort of my questions are like, who were we when things were slower, and who were we when it was harder to connect? Because arguably it's easier to connect on scrolling media and things like that. But then again, we've got huge epidemic of isolation and things now.
You know, it was new and it was exciting because I had a P.O. box at the time. I was afraid to have stuff sent to the house because I didn't know what was going to come in the house. So I had a P.O. box, and I was so excited to go to the P.O. box and open it up and see what was there.
Oh my God.
I mean, that was just it.
Totally. Yeah. On my P.O. box, I had to make sure I got one that was open 24 hours because if I ever got there and it was closed, I'd be heartbroken.
Oh my gosh, that'd be terrible.
I still remember mine, P.O. Box 105873. You know, isn't that amazing? What was yours? You probably remember the number.
I don't remember the number anymore. No. But we've still got some guys that we associate with who did start in the 90s. Do you know Matt Fazell?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, what about Matt doing we can ask him.
Oh yeah, I want to get anybody who was I want to get anybody who was doing
that's what I thought.
And
Matt was around in the 90s. Matt started in the 70s, and I can tell you that because he was one of the very early contributors to my comics back in the 1970s. Awesome. I know Matt for a long time.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of other ones, you know, that we can give you some names that might want to do it, you know.
For sure, I'm hoping.
And in case you didn't tell the people, it's both voice only and video. You can do either.
Depends on how people want to do it. Yeah. There are a couple people we're having to track down with, like, just, you know, if some people you have to chase down, you'll say, we're going to sit you down and put you on Zoom or whatever. And other people are eager to just contribute. But I'm hoping once it gets going that that people just keep contributing. Cause it's not for me, and it's not even for my audience. It's for 50 years from now, 100 years from now.
Yeah. That's very cool.
I always think, like, you know, if they're going to make a movie someday about making mini comics in the 80s, like, they'll have all this store of oral history to figure out some good details, you know, like, because it's probably stranger than they can imagine.
I wonder who would play me. Yeah. I don't know.
I think Jack Nicholson.
That'd be good.
Yeah, that's good. Clint Eastwood would.
You couldn't handle the truth. Yeah, Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that, and you know, there's a little bit of nostalgia connected to that. I admit that, like, I probably romanticized those times when, because they were when I was younger, but and so to some degree, I'm also hoping to connect with the other people who are kind of nostalgic for that as well, and get them to post. But also that's how that's how the cycling of generations works. It's sometimes the older people start telling stories, and somebody's got to write them down. You know?
I saw something on I guess it was on the Saul site, but you had a guy, one of the teachers at the school, who was kind of known as a historian.
Yeah.
And he passed away a couple of years ago.
Oh, John Ronan. No, he passed away recently.
Recently?
Yeah. He's an old Florida person too, raised in the Northeast, but he was around Gainesville, Florida for decades. Well, in Gainesville, one reason we set up SAW at Gainesville, a bunch of reasons. One is I had personal friends there, comics friends, but also at the University of Florida in Gainesville, the English department there had a colleague, a mentor there named Donald Alt, and he started this comics program, one of the first ones in the country, where a little part of the English department decided to study comics as well. And it was very strange for a while. And his specialty was William Blake, the poet, and Donald Duck. I mean, particularly Karl Barks. So, but he would attract the other sort of oddball English people who wanted to study comics, and John Ronan was one of them. And John, I don't know if your readers know about Bill Blackbeard back in San Francisco, but Bill Blackbeard was kind of the guy who saved thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of comic strip history, which was all being thrown into the trash because microfiche came along. So microfiche came along, these little tiny pieces of plastic, and newspapers were getting rid of their old archives, including pages of comic strips this large and beautiful and full color. And Bill Blackbeard with trucks, many trucks, went all across the country asking newspapers for their archives, and they would give it to him. And so he had a house and several storage units full of things like that. And anyway, John was the kind of guy who he would hear about it and go visit him. So he visited Bill Blackbeard. I forget when Blackbeard died. But so weirdo comics people would wind up in Gainesville sometimes because Don Alt, the historian, who was interested in Karl Barks and other things.
Oh, wow.
And he would also, inside an academic setting, make it possible for somebody to write papers about comics or and whereas at other schools they might not understand it. So yeah, John passed away just a few months ago. But he was our main historian there when we were doing the year-long program in person. And John was so generous. He would bring in issues of Puck magazine. I'm talking 1880. And he'd bring them in and pass them out and say, here, take a look at this. This is 100. I can't even do that math. 140, 150 years old. And he just passed around and say, take a look at this. This is what they were doing in 1880.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. I didn't even know there were comics in 1880.
Yeah.
Yellow Kid was the only one I ever heard of. The Yellow Kid.
Yeah, the Yellow Kid. I think it's 1906 is the.
I think it's, well, maybe.
No, sometimes my.
It might be a little earlier, and then the other one was Harriman with.
Sure. Yeah, I mean maybe Yellow Kid. I can't remember what happened in 1906.
I don't know either.
Something else happened in 1898, but I don't think it was Yellow Kid. But
I was
anyway,
only about 40 years old in 1880, so I don't know.
But there were, but yeah, there was an explosion, obviously, in the first decade of the 20th century, and by 1912 or something, there was probably 100 comic strips and various papers. Yeah. But earlier than that, I'm trying to think of when. Even maybe a little Nemo stuff. Anyway, I should know this stuff better than I do. But John was the guy to talk to, and he knew all this stuff. He would also tell you about like what war was going on between, France and England in 17 something or other, and how that affected political cartooning at the time. So he had all of this political history and geographical history combined with knowing exactly what was happening in the visual arts at the time. It was beyond me, really. Yeah,
sounds like he was an amazing guy, and. I know that's a great loss.
Yeah, it's too bad.
Now your comics, I noticed you're with Top Shelf.
I haven't published with Top Shelf in a while, but some of my books were there. Yeah,
wow.
I've been, it's funny. I never published a comic before college, right? But like nowadays, people are publishing at 12 or whatever, and but I met a friend just before I went to School of Visual Arts, so I would have been 17, and he was across the county this is upstate New York. So he lived in Woodstock, New York, where the festival, well, where it was named for anyway. So it was a little bit more of a artsy place. And I lived in a sort of divey part of the city or the county. And so I didn't know anything. I always hoped, again, I would hope maybe I'd get into greeting cards someday, you know, or maybe into comic strips. But he, at 15, 16, and 17, was producing his own mini comics. And this was
Really?
the mid 80s. Yeah. And so he showed me and I was like, whoa. And so, yeah, we became good friends, but I had never done any comics prior to that. But once I started, I never stopped. Once I started,
Right.
you know, that pattern of like finish a comic, go down to the copy store, print it out, give it to as many people as possible, hope to impress a few new people, you know, that pattern I've never really stopped. And so, yeah, so I published with Top Shelf. And
how did that come about? How did you get in with them?
Well, you know, early on, I mean, Top Shelf started just as one strange little one strange little publisher with one strange little book. and I sort of met them early in their career, you know.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to remember what the first book they published, because a lot of, so SPX, which is the comics festival that happens in Bethesda, Maryland, I think that started in 96 or something like that. Maybe 94, 95. But that was, again, all oddballs and weirdos. And so I probably would have met Brett, was the sole publisher there before Chris came on, but I probably would have met him there. And it was quite easy to pass a comic along. And if somebody likes it, you wind up talking later. And so that's how that really happened.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. You know, at the school, we try to talk about the many iterations of publishing, right? You know, there's the I see a big publisher and I want to get my book published with them. That's one version of getting published. And then there's hey, there's some scrappy little publishers who are looking for new work and they want to connect with you. And there's that version. But then there's the version of me and my friends are just going to publish. And, you know, and I think all of those are equally valid. And they also sort of like grow into each other, or sort of overlap sometimes. But so I've done a lot of self-publishing too, and still do.
Yeah.
Distribution. There's one thing that I think may have been a catalyst in your life, and I saw you talking about that you did comics. Your comics were like fantasy or whatever, they were comics. But then, and I hesitant to bring this up, but it's about Rosalie. It's Rosalie Lightning,
right?
But apparently that was a major catalyst in your life. That event in your life, must have been extremely affecting and tragic, obviously. And you got it. It was on the New York Times best-selling list of graphic novels.
Right.
Have you got something to say about that, or?
Yeah, well, I'll give you guys the comic version of it rather than the tragic version. No, I don't mean comic versus tragedy, but I mean cartooning versus the human story, which is that
right.
I'd been making comics, so I would say my first professional comics, meaning they were on slick paper, perhaps, and maybe got distributed into Diamond Comics or something. I would think that was 94.
Wow.
So I'd been making comics, but just no one read them for a very long time. And so, yeah, what Steve's talking about is in 2009, my wife and I welcomed a daughter, and in 2011 she died very suddenly. So even now, that's been a long time. But because comics was really the only thing I knew, it genuinely was the only thing I knew at all. It's what I turned to, and so I wrote and drew about it, and I think because I was in practice, and what I mean by in practice is like I was always writing and drawing. I think the book turned out okay, and it reached people for that reason. And so, yeah, not much more to say. Really,
apparently it turned out more than okay. A lot of people, are alluding to this book as being it was a great. Obviously, it was an emotional thing, and you were able to express yourself on the printed page to get out those emotions in comic book form. And and that's a slice of life. It's different from drawing superheroes and stuff. But if that's, I mean, but that's one thing that drives the creative individual. What is going on in their life? What is going on inside of them, or inside of them? If they can express that on a, in graphic literature on the printed page, then it's an outlet. It's an outlet, and it takes a great talent to do that and do it in an effective way. So I admire you for making this book. I haven't seen the book. I've seen pages of it online. I looked up. I've been researching you, for a few days, and but it looks like quite a moving comic.
How many pages is it?
240 or something like that.
Oh my gosh!
It's funny. Wow. I don't have an English edition of it anymore, but I have it in all these other languages. Let me see.
Wow. We speak several other languages.
I don't remember how many pages it was, but I think 200 and 270 anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, looks like that. That's the Portuguese version. Yeah, it was
all over the world.
Wow. I did. It was well. So, like Steve says, it was well appreciated and got reviewed well and things like that. And I tried my best. I tried to make a comic that would both express what I was trying to express about grief and loss, but also connect with people. And I mean, maybe it worked because, like Steve said, it was well received. But again, my point was like I was never not making comics, so I just used the thing I was good at. I just it's just everything else was just some weird version of Peanuts that no one ever read.
Well, when you say 270 pages, I just finished a full color comic, 32 pages. I don't think I would ever do that again. Holy mackerel. It took me 4.5 months to do that.
But 4.5 months isn't so long.
It seemed like it.
Well, what are you going to do with the next 4.5 months after that? Now that
I'm going to make a little digest version. It'll be about 20 pages. That'll be the second issue.
So you're just going to go a little slower.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's your prerogative. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel. That was a job. It's at the printer right now, so it should be coming.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, send me an order form.
Well,
we'll pick one up for the library. Yeah, I find. I mean, everybody's got their own relationship with with large projects, and some people really love to have a large project to work on, and other people like small things. And I'm definitely finding that my attention span is on shorter things these days. I did daily comic strips. I did them for about 3 years, I think. And that was the most fun I ever had as a cartoonist. And I wish I could.
Who was that for?
Well, it's funny. The story is that, so I had this character. Let me see if I have him somewhere. Oh, funny. I don't. Well, I had this character. His name was Hutch Owen, and he was kind of a hobo. He was a little bit cranky. He didn't have a job, and he was the character I worked with in the early '90s, and I did a couple books with Top Shelf, and then in around 2004 or something like that, I thought I would try and turn it into a comic strip, kind of like Bill Griffith did with Zippy the Pinhead, or any number of other things. And the funny thing is I had a good friend who was editor in chief of King Feature Syndicate and his name is Brendan Burford. He's no longer there, but we're still really good friends. And so I'd work on this daily strip. I did it for the web at first, and then I got into 2 newspapers on my own without any syndication help. But I'd bring it to Brendan. I'd say, Brendan, this is a good strip. And he'd say, I know, Tom, I love it, but it just would never sell in the newspaper. I'm like, oh, come on. So like about a year of that, a year and a half of trying to get Brendan to sell it or to buy it, and he wouldn't. But then, so I lost those 2 newspapers. The 2 newspapers were the Metro, which was in Boston and New York City. They were commuter papers. You'd see them on the subway a lot. And eventually I lost those 2 because there were editorial changes and stuff. And I thought, well, that's good because comic strips are hard and I don't want to do that anymore. But I was wrong because like a day or 2 later, I was like, oh man, I wish I had a comic strip to work on. And so I called my friend Margot Dubai, who's an old student, but by then we were really just good friends. And she grew up Arab American in California, and she had a lot of funny stories to tell. And so I said to Margot, I said, "Hey, what the world needs now is a family-friendly Arab American comic strip. We'll base it on your stories, and we'll collaborate on writing and drawing, and we'll try and sell it to Brendan." And she said, "You're crazy." But a week later, I convinced her, and we wrote and drew about 2 weeks worth of finishes, and maybe we sketched out 2 more weeks. Took it to Brendan, my friend, editor-in-chief of King Features, and he said, "These are great. Come back with two more months, and we'll sign contracts." I was like, "What?" I was so mad. You jerk. So that was early 2008. And so Margot and I worked, and you can find these online. They're called Ali's House. Ali, his like the name Ali's House. Somewhere they're out here online. Yeah. And so Margot and I worked with Brendan. This is how that sort of system works: is you work with the editor for 8 or 9 months, and you create a big backlog of strips, and then they launch it to the newspapers, and they say, here's the first 7 or 8 months with strips, and why don't you take a chance on this one? And that's how that system works. So we went through that process of the first 8 or 9 months, and in that time period, the housing bubble collapsed, the economy tanked. October 28, 2008 happened, and so we're sitting in January 2009. They're trying to sell our comic strips, and even then, the way they sell comic strips to newspapers was by car and feet. The salesmen get into their cars, they drive to this town and then that town and that town, and they have the folders, and they say, here's our latest offerings. And at the newspapers, they were turning them away. They were saying, "You're crazy. We can't take new strips on, and we want to pay less for Hagar the Horrible, less for Beetle Bailey. We're going to collapse any day. Can you give us a break on High and Lois?" So that was pretty much the end of that strip, is it just didn't launch into the newspaper.
Launch, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, but that's too bad.
Yeah, what was the point of that? Oh, so I really did like working in daily strips, though. It was a great experience, just having to come up.
What were they? 3 or 4 panel or what?
Yeah, 3 or 4, and
it could be 3 or 4.
Yeah, it's just the shape is important. The
punchline right at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to get kind of corny.
No problem for me.
The Sunday formatting is funny. The Sunday formatting is like, now I'm trying to remember. It's a horizontal sort of blob with a little bit on the left. Oh, that's it. That with a little column on the left that'll either get printed or not printed. So that little column on the left, yeah. And the only person who could break that was Bill Watterson with Calvin and Hobbes. In his later days, he said, "I'm going to give you a strip that you cannot cut or move panels around or anything. You get what you get, and it has to be this large." So
they actually move panels around. How can you have a strip with a punchline if they move panels around?
Well, it's more like they would stack them, so it could fit on 2 lines or 3
lines,
I see
what you're saying.
Things like that. But but anyway, yeah. So that was the Sunday was a very rigid sort of format, but you get used to it. It was okay. But great fun. I really loved comic strips, and but just the idea again, the daily deadline. I don't know if you know about my podcast, but which just ended.
Maybe not. Go ahead and tell us about that.
Well, with one of my teachers at SAW, her name's Jess Relifson, and we just have these conversations. But the main start of it was hit deadlines. Just create a system where you can just have a deadline to meet it. And by doing that, you'll create work. And by doing that, you'll grow as an artist and all that stuff. So the podcast is called The Terrible Anvil.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And the reason it's called The Terrible Anvil is there's an old quote by Émile Zola, the French writer, who says, one forges one's style on the terrible anvil of daily deadlines.
I wondered. I'm glad you said that, because I could not figure out the name. I watched, some of those, and why is it called The Terrible Anvil?
I guess because I went to your personal website. Is that where the podcast is?
No, that's pretty. I don't update that enough. But if you go to the SAW website, you should hopefully you'd see it.
I did see something where you were talking with another teacher, and you were talking about constructive criticism and how we accept or reject a constructive criticism. What is what some criticism is just hate speech, and some this isn't how you guys said it. This is just me interpreting. But some criticism is well received, and and then you guys were talking about the critic within yourself.
Yeah. And
how you can put something out and you worked hard on it, but you look at it and you go, that's crap, so you have an inner critic.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very interesting. So I was watching that earlier today. And, these guys, they think a lot and they come up with a lot of good stuff. So, but constructive criticism. Yeah, I did a video on. I have another YouTube channel called the Classic Comics Man channel. I did a video there where I talked about constructive criticism. Some people they can't handle any criticism at all, and constructive or otherwise. Some people just get pissed off, and but other people accept it. I mean, some people accept it too much. They're like, "Oh man, somebody criticized me. No good." I could say this, and I learned those because I talked about this before. Is that I don't. I used to draw a lot. I did a lot of. I can still draw, but I quit. I received a letter of comment to one of my books where I had I'd drawn a strip. It was a Dracula comic strip, and I put everything into it. And but I had a lot of friends who were really excellent artists. And we all contributed to this issue, but somebody sent me a letter and they said, I hate to tell you this, but your artwork was the worst in the entire book. And after that, I mean, that hit home, that was like, and I didn't draw anything for quite a while. I concentrated more on scripting, writing, and publishing and stuff. And now I'm starting to draw a little more again.
I keep
but it hit hard.
To draw again. I mean, when somebody does that to you, that's tough. I understand, but you got to keep drawing. Yeah. They don't know what they're talking about.
Well, I did something recently.
On our show where we look at small press comics, we promote them.
Yeah.
I don't believe you can critique them. How do you know what's in that artist's mind? I just don't see how I could critique mainstream comics easy, but not small press. I just don't see how you can critique that. So
there's a lot of fragile egos,
people what it looks like, but we're not going to critique them.
Yeah.
But they put their heart and their soul into their creative effort. And then somebody says, well, this sucks. Scare the baby with a copy. It's no good, so
I know what he's thinking.
But if you're strong enough, you come back, you take that, and you can dismiss it, or you can accept it, or you can just listen to get an overall view of what other people thought about it, and even looking at it yourself, putting it down, looking back at it a year or two later, or a month later, or whatever, and you can go, well, that's not that bad. And when I go back and I look at that strip that I'm talking about now, I say, that wasn't bad.
See,
I should have kept going.
You should have,
had that fragile ego, but it's the way in which you constructively criticize something.
Sure.
It's but you are dealing with a lot of people. Artists and writers have very fragile egos, and people get hurt very easily because they're putting everything into it.
For sure.
And there's a way to express, well, this is great, but it could be even better. If you did this, you just come up with, well, your work's not as good as anybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. In that episode you mentioned, I told a story where I was the person writing the criticism once. And I mentioned it early in the episode. Luckily I wasn't too mean, but I did write way back when, a long time ago. I wrote a friend in the regular mail, and I said, hey, I really like what you're doing, but I just really think you should do this, this, and this. And they wrote back and said, I don't think you really know what I'm trying to do. And they were right. You know, that person was right. And I realized like, oh, I shouldn't have written that email, or it was a
Because you
regular.
don't know what they're trying to
Yeah.
do.
And
Yeah.
I took that as a really hard lesson. I never did anything like that
Yeah.
again. And I'm
Because
glad he was strong enough to say that we're not really doing the same thing. And it's like what
Right.
Larned said, you know, you don't really know what's in my head and what I'm trying to do.
there can be a drawing that doesn't look right, and you don't know whether he did it on purpose or not. You know?
And
May have done it on purpose.
yeah, there's enough wrong with the world to criticize. I don't need to criticize somebody's drawing.
No.
Right.
You know?
Right. But I see your school as a way to instruct, encourage, and help people to just make great comics. You know, just to achieve their potential as a creative person, as an artist or writer, etc. And you know, so that's I admire what you're doing.
Yeah, we think what you're doing is just great.
Awesome.
It really is, and more people should get interested in it, especially if they want to create comics. What a place to go!
Yeah,
you
thanks.
can sure find out some great information on your site
and some support. We really just we really try to applaud anybody who's given it a go, and we want to give them the support that they need to keep going. And a lot of times, like Steve was talking about, that inner critic, sometimes that's a big deal for people, and they're like, everything they do, they feel like it sucks and they got to stop. But we're like, we help them say, no, it's good, and you can keep going.
Yeah, you got to teach people that's not, you know, don't quit. That's the main thing. Don't quit. Keep going. Yeah. Well, speaking of keep going,
that's definitely a mantra of ours.
We usually try to keep the show at about an hour, Tom. Mainly because the attention span on YouTube is very short. So I think we're going to try and wrap it up, but we really appreciate you coming on. It's been great.
This was super fun. Yeah, we got 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Maybe
that's right. We've got 2 minutes.
Do you have any final Tom, you have any final words about what you're doing?
Go ahead and wrap it up for us, Tom.
Well, I appreciate you guys, and I appreciate anybody trying to just keep the community alive, you know, keep the community active and connected, and saying, you know, these comics came in and I want to share them, or these people out there are doing something and let's take a look. And that's what we try and do where we are too. We try and connect people who are making comics. A lot of our people come in and they kind of feel like loners. They kind of feel like they don't have any friends doing what they're doing, you know, and then they come to us and they realize there's tons of us oddballs out there. So keeping the community alive is really important. And so that's part of why I'm doing the oral history thing, part of why we run the school, part of what I admire about you guys. I think just keeping communities strong, communities where what we're trying to do is express ourselves and express what it is we're going through, you know, as humans, as consumers of culture, whatever we are, you know. It's all important.
Yeah. Well, can't thank you enough.
Well, thanks.
It was an honor. It was a pleasure.
We will see you in the funny papers, I guess.
Okay, and on the next Friday night workshop, it's every Friday, 7 o'clock.
Steve,
Eastern.
can you make it? I know Steve.
I'm going to have to pop in there sometime soon, you know.
Yeah, I know you work kind of late.
It's a strange time, and most people are like, I don't want to be on screen at Friday night. I want to go somewhere else. So it's a strange time, but they're all archived on the YouTube. There's probably about 150 of them now. So
yeah,
they're always fun.
It's fun. So
awesome. Well, maybe I'll see you.
All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you.
All right.
And we will see you next time.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.